This is the JWN podcast. My guest today is a professional photographer. Now, whatever the job title of professional photographer means to you, it applies to him because he's an extremely talented artist who does it all. He has an amazing worldview due to a unique upbringing, and no matter what your creative interests are, I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Chris Smith. You did something really cool this year.
Yeah.
During all this? I think so. I don't know. Well, maybe it started before this year and I just don't know.
Oh, you're talking about the YouTube videos.
Your YouTube channel. So you've combined your career, your hobby / career. It's not even, calling it a hobby is tough, but judging from what I know of you and how you treat the community here, you like what you do. Mm-hmm. You know, so even if it wasn't your career, you'd still be treating it like a hobby. You'd still be very involved in the world of photography. Mm-hmm. And motorcycles.
What's the old saying? You do what you love, you never work a day in your life, right?
There you go. And now you have also a love for motorcycles.
Oh yeah, that stemmed from way back when. My parents got us a motorcycle when I was like, I don't know, 15 or something like that.
Wow.
Living in the bush in Africa, and we rode that baby all over the place.
So did you grow up in Africa, or was it just a station thing for, like, why were you there?
Well, my parents were missionaries. In fact, my dad's parents were missionaries, so I'm like a third generation missionary kid. But so he felt called to go back after he, got his adult life started. And so went back as a missionary after being a missionary kid. And so my four brothers and I all grew up over there, or my three brothers and I, four of us total. But I was born there, raised there till I left permanent residency when I was 18 after graduating high school, came back to the States. So yeah, that was my upbringing, was growing up shoeless and shirtless, running around Africa.
So your main mode of transportation was two wheels, motorcycle?
Yeah, we had bicycles too, but in the bush where my parents worked, they had a couple village trucks, that you could rent or, would service different things, but nobody owned a car or anything like that. And there were really very few roads. It was one dirt road into town and one dirt road out, really. Everybody owned a dugout canoe, though.
Really?
But yeah, we got a motorcycle, and I was like, "Whoa, this is cool!" Because on a bicycle, you can do a day trip for a couple dozen miles or whatever out to a different village, or we'd go on long day hikes and overnight hikes. But when you got a motorcycle, you could extend your boundaries as far as adventure goes.
Wow,
so really loved it.
What was so you grew up in this atmosphere that I think if you took my son and put him there right now, it would be such a culture shock to him, I imagine. Mm-hmm. When you came to America after growing up in a totally different, just lifestyle, what was the first thing that kind of just shocked you about it?
Well, I did experience some culture shock, but you have to bear in mind that we did come back to the States every 4 years. So a typical missionary schedule is you work in the field for 3 years, or is it 4 years? And then every fourth year you come back stateside and do what they call a furlough or home leave. And that's when my parents would go around and speak to the different churches that supported them, share slides about the work they're doing, raise capital, stuff like that. So my third grade year was spent in the United States. My 8th grade year was spent in the United States. And then 1 year when I was an infant as well, which I don't have any recollection of. But when we did come back for my 3rd grade year, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, because, this is my very first formative memories. And it was a big time culture shock. All the concrete and stores everywhere and neon signs. And I'm like, what is this place?
Do you remember what you preferred as a kid?
No. I mean, as a kid, it's just what you
comfortable.
Like anything, it's what you're used to.
Yeah.
So, you just say, well, this is what life is like. You live over here for a while and then you change to over here. And I do believe that all of the traveling that we did and the moving around that we did, it does a number of things, but one of which is it made my personality more of a chameleon in that it's easier to make friends, I think, than some people, because you had to make new friends all the time. Mm-hmm. So it became a thing that's just something you had to do, is to be able to fit into society and make new friends everywhere you went. But the other thing is it definitely instilled a deep wanderlust in me, to be able to see the world, and the different things that my parents allowed us to experience basically drilled into me that the world has got so much to offer. I want to see all of it. And so that's, photography became a passion of mine over there. My dad's a big photo buff. He got me my first SLR back in the day. He had a Pentax K1000 and, so a legendary camera. But so that bug bit me early on. Yeah. And then the bug for travel bit me early on because of all the places we'd seen. I mean, they worked in Africa. Mm-hmm. And then we'd come back to the States every 4 years. Well, my parents were pretty smart. So they'd be like, we have to make a stopover in England back then, or not England, but in Europe somewhere. It's just the way the flights worked. You always went through Brussels or went through Portugal, or, there's always mm-hmm. a stopover before you came to the States. So they always factored in a week or two of sightseeing.
That's awesome.
At an early age, I got to see the Colosseum in Rome and, just the Blue Grotto and the Matterhorn in Switzerland. So it's pretty neat to have experienced all of that when I was so young. But that instilled that wanderlust in me to be able to see as much of the world as I could. And of course, the bug for motorcyclists.
Yeah.
So those are the three main focuses of our YouTube channel, which is Moto Photo Adventures.
Right. And it's not just you.
Correct.
Yeah. So you have all of these passions, and you kind of found other like-minded people mm-hmm. to connect with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How did that all come together?
Just purely by,
Well, you also you run the Charleston Photographers Lunch Group.
Yeah.
And I believe all these guys are members of that.
Yes.
Is that how you met?
Yeah.
Is that how you all came to? So you've been a curator of like the photographic community mm-hmm. in this area. And obviously it's paid you back as far as friendships and connections and things like that. Mm-hmm. Why did you started that, right?
Yeah. So the Charleston Photographers Lunch Group basically began because of a philosophy early on, just a handful of us. It's hard for young photographers to understand what it used to be like, but photography used to be in Charleston. There were 4, maybe 5 main studios, right. And those were the photographers in town. And there were a few advanced amateurs that would go in and be a film processor for them, or, be a front desk manager for them. If you were in the photography, or you worked at a camera store, which we all know don't exist anymore unless you live in New York. So it was a totally different climate back then. But the photographers who did have their studios, it was very standoffish. So I had my little corner, I'm Jack Alterman, or I'm whoever, so I have my little studio and my little set of clients, and I don't want to talk to you. I don't give away my trade secrets. So most of the photographers in town didn't really get together much, talk much, not a whole lot of information exchange going on. And of course, even less so for anybody that was just a advanced amateur.
Right.
You got all of your knowledge when you walked into a Ritz camera store and talked to the guy at the counter. But so a few of us photographers kind of got together as digital photography was coming about and DSLRs were becoming more mainstream. And we said, the internet was blossoming, and we're like, we need to change this mindset. We need to become more open and help each other grow.
Yeah. Or else it's going to be done without you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And a rising tide raises all ships, right?
Right.
So let's help each other become better photographers. Let's really create a community in Charleston that is more open and inviting. And that's kind of how it all started. And it literally was a lunch group before it went online. You know, it was just a group of us. We had a mailing list, and to get on the mailing list, you had to be invited by somebody in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the mailing list just went out every now and then and said, hey, we're going to grab lunch at so-and-so. And we said, you know, get together and sit around and talk about new gear we bought and new techniques and problems we were having with our clients. And how are you handling this? And what are you doing about that? And so that's how it all started. And then, of course, Facebook hit.
Yeah.
So we had to start a Facebook page, and, you know, it all went online.
Yeah. And you've made these great connections. Photography to me is an art form that is very, very different than other art forms that I have been a fan of or have been involved in some degree, in the fact that it's super, super inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone now is a photographer.
Oh, yeah.
They walk around with an excellent camera in their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of whether or not they decide to start actually using it to create something more than document like something that's happening in front of them.
Right.
So it's an interesting group of people when you get into the world of photography, because much like you're already a very open-minded person, right? You're not, but there's just a ton of different philosophies, different types of people that get into photography.
Personalities.
Different personalities.
Sure.
You know, some people are of the mindset that like you take a picture and you don't edit it. Like
right.
completely devoid of the fact that like the camera has already done some editing for you.
Right,
right. So do you want the camera to do it, or do you want to do it? It's one of those weird situations.
And that mindset is kind of funny because it starts off with, well, you know, back in the film days, we didn't edit. Well, talk to Ansel Adams. Yeah. His stuff is very doctored.
Right. The dark room wasn't just a place to develop the photo. You really had to
manipulate.
Yeah.
Right.
So I do find it one of the more interesting art forms in that, like, it's just so it's so vast now, right. Where it used to. I mean, there was a time when photography first came up where there, you know, traditional artists were like, "That's not an art form. How's that an art form?" And then you have photographers that proved that it is,
right?
You know,
sure.
And now you've got this huge landscape of people that
and the different subject matter that, I mean, so many specialists in this area and that area. It's just unbelievable.
So with all of that said, this is a long way to get to a question. Who are your photographic influences as far as professional photographers that you kind of look to mimic, or you see their work and you go like, oh, that talks to me? Who comes to mind when I say that? And I know it changes, by the way.
Oh, yeah. It changes a lot. I will say probably one of the biggest influences on me was Joe McNally. Have you ever seen any of his work?
Dude, whenever someone talks to me about you, I say he's the Charleston Joe McNally.
Thanks.
He pulls out the speed lights with like 6 different heads on it. And I'm like, it's Charleston's own Joe McNally.
That's funny.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that, because you guys have a very similar approach as far as, you know, you do everything. You're definitely a Swiss Army knife of a photographer.
Very
much
very
like
true.
he is.
Yeah. My brother Brian is a financial planner, and he's always saying, you need to diversify your portfolio. I don't think he meant photography wise, but that's kind of the way and I'll be honest with you, with this whole COVID thing and how everything got shut down, that's one of the few ways that we've been able to stay afloat, is because of that diversity that I already had in my portfolio. You know, so many of my friends who specialize in just shooting corporate events, or just shooting weddings, or just shooting, you know, certain things that involve large groups of people, are struggling, man. and it's painful to see. And of course, we're struggling too. But uh, it's been amazing to see how things have shifted. In that, okay, I can't shoot large weddings with 300 guests anymore, but look at all of these corporate photographers that have been calling me out to do this, that, and the other. So look at all these people who are needing my drone services now, which is another thing that we added to our repertoire. So it's been really a blessing to see that other parts of my repertoire are being called into action now that we need them.
Yeah.
But going back to what you were talking about as far as art forms, see, I used to think that too, man, because
Really?
I'd think of like a Georgia O'Keeffe or, artists, painters, sculptors. I'm like, that's real art. And I was just horrible at it. I always knew that I was a creative, if you want to, I'm doing air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's listening that can see these. I'm sitting here doing air quotes like you can see them. Anyway, so I always knew personality-wise that I was a creative as I was going through my formative years. But, I would take art classes and I'd be like, man, I suck. I can't paint. I can't draw. I can't do all this stuff. And man, when I found photography, I was like, whoa, this is my gig. This is because I'm not just a creative in the ethereal, but I'm a very hands-on techie guy.
Right.
So now I have an art form that is geared for me. It speaks to my gearhead. It speaks to my techie side.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of physics involved in photography, the angle
Problem
of
solving.
incidence, the angle of reflectance, all of those different things. Just look at things like apertures and shutter speeds and, reciprocals and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
There's just a lot of math and physics involved. So that part of me could be infused into that art form. So I found my calling when I found photography. And I still thought that it was just something that people did as a hobby. And lucky for me, Mr. Rogers at college was like, Chris, why are you studying to be, I was originally thinking I was going to go into TV production. And he's like, why are you doing that? Your photography is the bomb. That's the way to go. You need to focus on that. And I'm like, but man, you can't make a living at taking pictures.
Right.
and thank you so much to college professors like him. He's like, yes, you can. And here's how. And so.
Isn't it amazing when you have that one person in your life that flips the switch for you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It might have been in you all along, but there's just somebody who just kind of like turns the light on.
Right.
And some people don't, it's one of those things I try to ask artists, like at a certain point in their formative years, did somebody compliment them or give them the encouragement? Yeah. To realize that they had a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, if you know the person that did it, or if you can remember that time, it's definitely, it's a gift to understand that person really did help you. That's awesome.
And just to give credit where credit is due, I may have said Mr. Rogers, but it's Roger Varland. But he was a fantastic professor and really helped guide my career, which was fantastic.
Yeah, I love the fact that you remember that though, because
I'm terrible with names, but I do remember very specific people who have, like we were talking about, that have encouraged or guided you one way or the other. Even in high school back in, where I grew up in the Congo, Mrs. Schartzer, my gosh, was the art professor back then. And she'd basically give me the keys to the darkroom and be like, man, you're above where everybody else is. Just here's the keys. Go do your thing.
Cool. That's so cool. They had a dark room in my high school that I never stepped foot in.
Oh man!
And it's one of those things. it went over my head. But the barrier to entry into photography just didn't exist for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I was not, unless I had realized, I could just borrow the school's equipment. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have any like
a camera.
Oh gosh, no.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
But
where did you grow up?
In New York.
Oh.
In Long Island.
Huh.
And so
And you never went into a darkroom? You're a New Yorker?
No. Dude,
Wow.
I am very late in my life to the photography game. It wasn't until I had kids that I discovered it as an art, where I started to take it seriously, because I was always into music and other forms and like regular just art, kind of art stuff, like what you would in high school might consider just regular art, painting, drawing, that kind of stuff. But I never took photography seriously. In fact, I went through all of the travels I did with the band. I didn't carry a camera.
Wow.
And it kills me.
Wow.
It kills me. Only photos we have are like disposable cameras that our bass player would buy. That's the only photos that we have.
Man.
Or what other people would take of us. But for the most part, it was just like, it's just all up here, which of course is
fading fast.
Oh yeah. Well, when we get together once every 10 years or so and sit down and talk about, like, we all have very vastly different memories depending on what level of abuse we were doing to ourselves. So
that's funny.
Yeah, there's
Now, how old are your kids?
My daughter's 20.
Wow. Okay.
And my son, he'll be 17 next month.
So they would totally have no idea of what you're talking about. How can you be on these trips and not have a camera?
Oh yeah.
I mean, they've got a cell phone in their pocket everywhere they go.
Yeah. And it's one of those weird things where I just don't know why I didn't think about photography. It just wasn't on my radar.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? I just
wasn't on anybody's radar.
I didn't think about it. And I always thought about it as an expensive thing. Because,
well, it was.
Yeah, because you had, and I was always broke.
Right.
So if I had money, it's like, oh, I like to buy a pack of cigarettes or I could buy film. And I made the poor choice.
Right.
So that was definitely, but it wasn't until I had kids. And then all of a sudden I wasn't playing music anymore. I wasn't doing any art form. I was working in IT. And, I got a digital camera, it was a Fuji Fine Pix. It was probably not even a megapixel. And, I remember
it came with a 2 megabyte card.
Probably.
My first digital camera came with an 8 megabyte card.
Yeah.
That's less than one photograph in today's cameras.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't fit a single picture in an
with your cell phone.
With your cell phone even. Yeah. They're larger than a megabyte, 8 megabytes.
So I would, I took pictures of my kids, and I remember specifically our neighbor that lived across the street who had kids the same age as ours. We were going on a day trip and I had my camera. She's like, oh, great. Joe's bringing his camera. He takes such good pictures. And I was like, really? What? And then I started looking at different cameras. I was like, well, how do people get these other cameras that are so sharp? And then I was like, oh, okay. That's what those big cameras are for. Right. That's why they have these giant pieces of glass on them.
Right.
So, that's what got me into photography. I stumbled into it, and it became an art form for me to kind of, and like you, I have very technical, like nerdy kind of,
I didn't use the nerd term.
Let me help you. There is a nerdiness to the technology part, because you see it. You see some photographers who don't have that. No. And they have the vision, they have the skill
they have the eye.
They have the eye, but they struggle with the technology part.
Exactly.
Yeah. And a lot of times, and forget lighting.
Oh, absolutely.
That was one of the best things that I learned about during that journey, was how lighting works.
Oh, lighting is key. George Eastman, the founder of Kodak, that was one of his famous quotes, is know light. Light is the key to photography.
Yeah.
Know it for all you're worth, and you will have the keys. But
when you start walking around and seeing light and trying to figure out, okay, why is it doing that? How is it doing that? How can I replicate that in a situation where it wasn't like that?
Right. And then beautiful sunlight coming through the trees and highlighting the back of the blonde girl's hair. It's just, you start noticing that. And then you're out there on a gray, dreary day, and the girl had and another client had specifically said, oh, I love the pictures you did of so-and-so. Well, that's the kind of the mood that she wants.
Yeah.
It's a gray, dreary day. You can't take that picture, right? Well, yes, you can. You just pull out a speed light, put an orange gel on it, and it mimics the sun.
Yeah, and you start to understand that, and that's a lot of where the problem solving geekiness marries with
absolutely
the photographic eye, because it's no longer a situation where, well, I can't do it because it's not the right time of day. It's all right, we're gonna mimic this. We're gonna solve this issue and make it work.
Absolutely.
And that's definitely an advantage to having that mindset. And when you have all of them, which you do, it basically makes it so that you're doing something you love, and you're, like you said earlier, it doesn't feel like work to you at that point, because now you're just kind of like, for the same reason someone might do a crossword puzzle. Yeah. You're just enjoying the whole process.
Fun. Yeah.
Man. So now, when you finish college, at what point did you decide to go professional photographer, and what was that path like? Did you apprentice with anyone? How, give me lay down the foundation.
Now you're gonna date me, man. You're gonna make me sound like I'm like I've been doing this for over 25 years, which I have, but I don't want to admit that in public. But yeah, no, absolutely. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, like I was saying, there were only a few master photographers or whatever in your hometown, and so I'd gone to school my schooling was taking place in Michigan, but again, this professor, Roger Varland, we didn't have a professional photography degree at the school that I was attending. By this time, I was, had all my friends there. I was on the college, the soccer team. I was on the tennis team, so I didn't want to move anywhere. And he said, well, the New York Institute of Photography has a great correspondence course, and he was willing to help me as far as mentoring and stuff like that. So I did that separately for my photography degree. But then after that, I moved back to Ohio. My parents, as I mentioned earlier, would come back to the States every 4 years. So at that point, they had moved back to the States, and they were living in Ohio. And so I said, well, I'll go down there. And I got a job working at a camera store, which is kind of what a lot of people did to get their spring, that was the springboard into professional photography back then. So I was working at Click Camera and Video, and I'm so glad I did, because that's where I met my wife, Cami, and she had gone to the Ohio Institute of Photography. And so we were working at different stores, and a chance encounter, my lab technician had to go home on a family emergency, and I called the home office and said, hey, my lab technician has to leave. Is there anybody in town that can come and fill in, run the lab for me so that I can keep filling these orders this evening? And they put out like a call, and Cammie's like, I'm just getting off my shift. I guess I can go and stop and finish out the rest of the day there as well. So anyway, that's where we met. And
wait. All right, hold on a second. Don't just barrel through this. So she walks into the place while you're working, right?
No. I'm not even there.
You're not even there.
So I called and got this, okay, this is what's happening. Well, then my shift ended. And so I left, and of course we'd arranged she was going to come by and take over the lab. And of course there were other staff that was running the front for me. So then the other manager, Christine, had come in, I think, at that point. So I left, and we had, back then, the way that you demonstrated which cameras did what features and how they handled this, that, and the other, is we took pictures with different cameras and then made little photo albums. So we'd have a little photo album of all of us in the store goofing off, or sometimes staff would take a camera home, let's say over Thanksgiving, and shoot pictures with it. And then they'd bring those pictures in, and we'd make duplicates and put them in a little album so that people could see, oh yeah, the Canon EOS Rebel, this is how good a picture it can take for you, and this is why, and blah, 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 and here are some pictures to prove it. So I had taken one of the cameras home, and of course there were pictures of me in some of these albums. And Cami goes to Christine, he goes, boy, he's cute. So then I came
So
back to
wait a
work the
second.
next day, and Christine's like, "You need to call Cami. She thinks you're cute."
Wait a
And
second. You met her because you were basically the model.
pretty much.
That's
yeah, pretty
fantastic.
much.
That's fantastic.
I'll tell you another great story
Wait,
about
were
our...
those selfies?
No, we didn't.
They weren't
That did not exist back then.
Well, you know what I mean, though. Did you take the picture, put it on a timer and whatnot? No, someone else just took a picture of you.
Yeah. So, like, if there's 2 or 3 salespeople in the store during the given day, and we have a lull, there's not any clients there.
They would just take a picture of you.
Somebody
and
will
vice versa.
say, "Well, here, let's finish out this roll of pictures on the Olympus OM1 or whatever." And so, let's demonstrate how good the Pentax PZ1000 is with flash. And so that person would just get the camera and start taking pictures of some of the other team members. Yeah. But so then I called her up, and we set up a date. And the cool part is we arranged to go to a movie. And I got there, and she was already inside. And I'm getting ready to go up to the counter and get the tickets. And she's like, "I already got the tickets." I said, "What? I asked you out on the date. What, And she goes, "I know, but this way I know I have a second date."
Oh, shit. Well, darn. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then just for those of you listening, the name of Chris's photography company it's not his photography company.
Right.
It's Chris and Cami Photography.
Chris and Cami, yep. Everybody sees me, and I'm the face of the operations because I'm the one doing most of the photography. But Cami really runs the business. I mean, running a photography business is really, really, really hard work.
So you've been with her since that point in your career.
Yeah. I got a job transfer. We moved to Ohio, or moved down to Charleston, fell in love down here. Worked for Olin Mills for a while, worked for different camera stores for a while, and started our own business, of course, on the side. Sort of built that up until we had enough clientele to where we knew that we didn't need, the income from another source. And so I jumped ship and kept building it up. And then I think maybe like a year or so later, she jumped ship from the job that she had. And then we've just been doing the photography business ever since. But I told you earlier, I have that artistic side. I'm that creative. Well, if you are that person, it's really hard for you to also be good at managing things like money and expenses and bookkeeping and
advertising and business planning.
Yes, that kind of thing. When you're a visionary, you just think of the big picture, and you have this plan and these ideas in your head. But the little minutia that you have to take care of when you own a business, especially in South Carolina, all the different licenses you have to have, all the different taxes that you have to pay. It's a royal pain, and bless her heart, Cami handles all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing situation to try. How many artists exist that you will never find out because of what you just said? Because they didn't have that person in their life to help them with this side of the world that is closed off to them.
Right.
And it's a common problem. I mean, there's certain aspects of that I still struggle with. And I was, lucky enough to realize that and outsource
smart
things like bookkeeping out of my hands, because while I can figure out how to do it, it's almost like your soul is being ripped from you.
Yes.
When you're trying to reconcile your books at the end of the month, it's like you might as well just be pulling fingernails straight off my hands. Yeah. It's awful, and it's hard for people who accountants or people who do that kind of stuff to understand. You know what I'm saying? To flip it.
Why doesn't Joe understand this?
Yeah, Joe understands it. Joe can't, physically is repulsed by it.
I have the same. I was just telling Cami this morning. In fact, I'll go to check out, and I have like many anxiety attacks. Like, oh my gosh, is this a business expense, or do I use the personal credit card or the business credit card, or what am I? I have these little mini anxiety attacks. Like,
Yeah.
accounting wise, I just don't get it. It's just, it eludes me, and so it's
It's an amazing partnership to be able to have that.
yeah, I agree.
And it's a testament to your continued success over 25 years now that you've been doing this. Okay.
We'd have gone under belly up many years ago. I'd have been buying the latest, greatest camera every single year, and come to find out, I'm deep in debt.
Well, let me ask you a question about the art of photography. I know that you are a Swiss Army knife and you do pretty much just about whatever anyone asks you to. Has there been some form of photography where you've done it and you've said, I don't think this is for me, and you've just kind of shut it out of your life?
Absolutely. Do I have to tell you?
You don't have to do anything if you'd like to talk about it. I mean, I could tell you exactly the things that I've tried and decided not for me, but it's
there's one specific genre of photography that that over the last 3 or 4 years has really developed into its own beautiful and amazing art form in and of itself.
Yeah.
It's totally different than what it used to be. And that is newborn photography.
Right.
And I used to do everything, including newborn photography. So it was common, I would photograph somebody's engagement pictures. I would photograph the bridal portraits. I would photograph their wedding. And then a few years later, they'd call me up. Oh, you did such a great job with our wedding. And guess what? We're pregnant. Okay, let's go out. We'll do some maternity portraits. We'd do those. And then, we'd eventually the baby would be born. So then I would do their newborn pictures. And then their 1-year pictures for the child. And, their growing up photos and their family portraits over the years. And I have photographed weddings of children that I photographed their parents' weddings. So that'll tell you how old I am. But over the years, I have realized that the newborn photos just really aren't my thing.
Really?
I've been peed on enough. And pooped on enough. And to be honest, it has just blossomed into its own very unique art form that involves a huge amount of props. And majority of my photography is done on location.
Yeah.
I can create any kind of light you want anywhere. But to be able to do it right, I would have to carry a pickup truck full of stuff to a client's house.
I was about to say, it's hard to come up with a giant beanbag chair and a teddy bear on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
People would start looking at you real weird. Like, why does that guy have a 6-foot motorcycle strapped to the back? 6-foot teddy bear strapped to the back of his motorcycle. Yeah. So, okay.
So that's just one of the things that I have just decided, you know what, it's just one of those things. I have so many friends in the Charleston Photographers Lunch group, people have become close to who specialize in that. Sterling Pickett, for example. Laura Stribling's another good one. So I happily just say, you know what? I loved photographing your wedding. I loved photographing your engagement pictures. I'm going to skip the newborn photos and I'm going to send you to so-and-so. And then just don't forget about me.
Yeah. But I love when it's time for the Christmas cards, I'm there.
Yeah. So then when the kid gets to be a year old, hopefully they come back. But if they end up staying with the other photographer, I'm totally cool with that too. But so that's the that's the one thing that I just don't really love.
So on the opposite,
and I love kids, I love babies, I love all that. But
I 100% get it. As far as there's certain things where you're you don't enjoy it, where it feels like work.
Absolutely.
And you're like, this isn't for me. And you know it after a while, you just go and when you're pulling up to a job and you dread it, and you're like, I don't want to be here.
Oh yeah. Now let's swing that the other direction, though.
That's exactly what I wanted to do.
Talk about jobs where you pull off a job and go, holy crap, they're paying me to do this?
Yeah.
Drones is that for me right now.
Really?
I can't even get over it. I'm like, Because, you got to remember my background. I grew up in Africa. I didn't grow up with a Nintendo. I mean, we had electricity one night a week when we had the diesel to run the diesel generator for the village. So that's how little electronics I had.
Right.
And so I didn't grow up with joysticks and things like that. So learning how to fly a drone, while I am technically, I have a lot of innate technical ability, it was totally foreign to me.
Yeah.
And so now that I've grasped it and mastered it, it's so much fun. And I'm like, they're paying me to do this?
Right. Well, I mean, how many times have you been on a job for doing the drone and you're like, all right, I got what I needed. I got about 15 minutes of battery. I'm just going to fly around and look busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
I used to love RC cars when I was a kid. In fact, in my 8th grade yearbook, it said, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And mine said RC car hobby shop owner.
Oh, that is hilarious.
So there's a certain aspect. Now, I've not gotten into the building the drones, the FPV thing. That looks dangerous. There's certain things where I go, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's going to take up a lot of my time that I can't afford.
I'll leave that to the professionals.
Yeah. But there's still that little child in me comes to life when I get up there and I'm like, and it's a beautiful day and you're just like, this is fun. Yeah. This is so cool.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and you might be photographing some beautiful house on Kiowa Island or where. Well, excuse me. We need to cut that out because Kiowa Island is now cracking down on drone flying on their properties. But anyway, so let's say you're on Wild Dunes and you're photographing this beautiful house, and you've got 15% battery left or whatever, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna go over and shoot some pictures of some scenery.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you turn it around and like, look at this beautiful landscape here. Look at this beach.
That'll make a really nice Facebook profile for me.
Oh yeah,
or banner photo.
Oh yeah. So another thing that you are locally famous for, is your sports photos.
Oh, thanks.
Tennis.
Yeah.
How did you get that whole thing lined up? How did that start?
Lucky being in the right place, right time kind of thing. I'm a tennis player. As I mentioned earlier, I played on the tennis team in college. And so I love tennis to begin with. And so years ago, back in the film days, do you remember film?
I mean, the only film camera I ever owned, I swear to God, before I had a digital camera that I personally owned, was one of those out of the back of Boys Life magazine spy cameras, the 110s, where it was just basically the cartridge of 110 film, and it had like a thing that snapped on it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's the only camera I ever owned.
That was film.
That was film.
Well,
so,
back in the...
I remember them, but...
Back in the film days, sports was really tough because, you're manually focusing your lenses, shooting on film. So you're very limited on what you can actually capture. If you have ever studied the decisive moment in photography.
Henri Cartier-Bresson.
Henri Cartier-Bresson. Anyway, sorry, I had to throw the French accent in there.
There you go.
But anyway, that factored in very, very big. Nowadays, there's a lot easier spray and pray technique.
Oh yeah.
But I would go down to Amelia Island when the Family Circle Cup was the thing, but it took place on Amelia Island in Georgia, Florida, right? Amelia Island.
It's right on the border there,
somewhere down there.
It's somewhere Florida, like right around Jacksonville, but
anyway. And I would basically shoot it as a stringer for the Post and Courier. So I would just go down there on spec. That's what they used to call it. I would just drive down, do my own thing, take pictures of what I thought was cool, and then I'd submit them, and hopefully they'd buy a picture or two. That was it, just for fun.
Yeah.
Well, then the tournament moved to Charleston, to Daniel Island. And I already had a portfolio of shots. And the first year they moved to Charleston, they hired, I think it was Getty Images, to be their official photographer. And the way the contract worked with Getty Images, if you had their photographers cover an event for you, was they would cover the event, but then you would have to pay for the pictures.
for each photo
that you used. And so as the former tournament manager was like, man, this is getting really expensive doing it this way. Why don't we just hire our own photographer and then we'll have all the images internal? So she put out a APB, if you will, and said, if you're a photographer in town and sports photographer, and we're looking to hire our own photographer.
And you had this cache of
beautiful images from over the years of tennis. And so I was just lucky, So the moral in that whole story, I guess, is if you have something that you love doing, you should definitely do it because it could pay off dividends in the long run.
I mean, it seems to be a constant in your life. Is the things that you love to do turn into a financial opportunity, basically.
Very true. Yeah, so I've been the official Volvo Car Open / Family Circle photographer for, going on 15 years, I think now.
And it's gorgeous because you see the images will span, they'll have them up and down the whole,
Instagram?
Well, inside the stadium,
too.
Yeah.
They are all over the stadium. They do a great job of promoting the tournament. The new tournament director, Bob Moran and Eleanor, I mean, the whole team at the Volvo Car Open is fantastic. Their marketing department, obviously marketing, they really have taken it to the next level. And I think as far as tournaments go, the players, I mean, we're talking the top players in the tournament, in the world. I think they genuinely love coming to Charleston, partly because of how hospitable Charleston is, what a beautiful and incredible city it is, but because the tournament director and the staff and the facility people, they're just so kind and gracious and do such a good job. But anyway, and we feel that as the photographers. I mean, they take care of us. They do a really nice job. Come into the media tent and, hey, pat you on the back. How you doing? You holding up okay? So it's just really nice. I don't know of any other tournament that does it that way.
Let me ask you a question about kind of bouncing off the things that you love that have turned into, like, basically.
You make it sound like I'm made of money, Joe.
You're like, well, no, I'm saying you're a when it comes to you have a King Midas touch.
Oh, no.
And now I don't mean it in maybe the businessman, like, must get all the money situation. I mean it in, like, you're doing things to provide, to sustain your business that you love. You're not, your level of compromise is probably a lot more weighted in the things that you love than the things that you have to do.
Oh, yeah. Like we were talking about earlier, or maybe, I'm sorry, it wasn't you. I'm confused. But I had lunch with my buddy Jason, and we were just having a chat, and he was like, yeah, money just doesn't really mean anything to me. I just want to do what makes me happy and what I think makes other people happy. And I'm like, yeah, me too.
It's extremely hard to explain that concept to people that don't have that, because it's very clear. I think we're seeing it in America. How different we can be.
Sure, absolutely.
And for the people that have that feeling of worth that's not attached to a monetary situation. In other words, where you find value in creating something that you're proud of, right? But if someone else sees it and goes, well, how much can you get for it? And you're like, I don't know, $20.
Right.
And they're like, well, then that's a failure. And you're like, no, but this is something I will forever cherish. Like, this image, I will always look back and go, hey, this is, as photographers, especially, it's very difficult to get an image throughout the course of a year. If you get a dozen images that you can look back on and go like, oh, that's portfolio worthy. That's a good year. That sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But you might take thousands of beautiful images, but the ones that speak
Stand
to
out.
you. Yeah.
Back in the days of National Geographic, photographers would come back from assignment with 100 rolls of 36 exposure film, and they would be delighted, over the moon, if they had 4 images on a roll that they loved, that they would turn in.
It was worth printing.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a weird it's a weird thing to try to explain to someone who puts value in the monetary success of something.
Right.
As like, no, that doesn't necessarily mean it's successful. It just means that you were able to get money out of it. That doesn't always.
Sure.
It's not the metric for success that you're gauging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you have to balance that. Personally, I often talk about, you have your monetary gain, but then there's that ethereal gain. So you have to have a little bit of balance there somehow, the yin and the yang thing. If you're only shooting for money, then it's just a job.
Yeah.
If you're only shooting for what you love and you don't have somebody smart and intelligent and beautiful like my wife Cami, who's learning how or figuring out a way to make a living out of what you do, then that's too unbalanced the other way. So there's a balance in there you have to find.
Right.
But how many parents do you know? Your kids are at that age where you've told them, they're going to college and they don't know what to do, and well, follow your passion or follow your heart. How many times do you hear that?
Yeah, and it's hard because especially when your kids, like my daughter, when she was starting to go to school, it's a tough decision because she was following her heart, and in a situation that I clearly and my wife clearly thought from a logical standpoint, this is not going to work because she wanted to go to school in New York City. She went. This is very personal, but she won't have a problem with me talking about this. She wanted to go to school in New York City. She got accepted at Pratt, which is an art school. Fantastic. She wanted to go for creative writing. The problem was, if you were to add up the cost of that school, right, and what they would give to her, would she ever even be able to pay it back?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you start thinking in those terms.
Sure.
You start trying to bring logic into something that I understand 100% why she felt like she needed to do it.
The return on the investment just was not there.
And there was nothing I knew that my wife or I could say that would kind of make that clear. And we facilitated for her to go there. And after one semester, she came to that conclusion herself.
Oh.
So she transferred back here, and then, she kind of did the math, and she also realized, hey, maybe this isn't what I want.
Right.
But it's one of those things like, it's so scary when you're looking at a situation like that where you're like, yes, follow your heart. But also understand if you follow your heart down a path that is going to make you a slave to that because you'll never get out from underneath the thumb of that thing.
Sure.
Especially when you're at an age where you might change your mind tomorrow.
Right.
It's good to maybe come to that conclusion, but you got to let kids figure it out on their own, that type of thing.
That's very true.
But
and hat goes off to you letting her do that. I thank my parents all the time because they let us do stuff that they probably knew was never going to go anywhere. I mean, you're living in Africa and resources are slim. As a missionary, you don't get paid much. But, 1 year they bought me a guitar, and I'm like, I thought I wanted a guitar. And I enjoyed it for a number of years. It was great. And to this day, I wish I had kept it up and could play. But I just wasn't good at it, let's be honest. So anyway, I just don't have a musical bone in my body. But they allowed me to explore that and try it. And,
Yeah. Your creative language came out in a different way, but you knew you had something in you.
Yeah.
It just wasn't that.
Yeah.
But that's cool. That's an excellent thing.
I think I could have either been a writer. I'm a pretty good writer, or a photographer. Those are pretty much my options. So I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah. Writing is so romantic, but it's also so like, that's one of those professions that I'm like, man, how much of a hustle it must be to make a living
as a writer.
The girl I had in last week, Kaylin Oyer, she's the arts and entertainment writer for the Post and Courier.
Oh, that's right.
And she, the amount of work she has to put in to make money, it's a lot,
right?
And she loves what she does. Obviously, that's why she does it. But I've always thought about that, like, oh man, how much of that would you do? Like, what, that lifestyle sounds so awesome, except what about those days when you just don't want to do it?
Right.
And you still have to be a professional and do it.
I mean, look at people who write books, you know. You're like, you think that all they have to do is sit around until they get inspired and then they write. But it's a business too. They have to sit down and figure out ways to get words on the paper.
Yeah, and they'll write and throw stuff out, and say, kind of like photography, where you'll take a lot of pictures and just most of them will get deleted or just not deleted, but thrown into a file of photos you'll never look at again.
Well, how many times have you been on a photo shoot? Let's say you're photographing, I don't know, some corporate photos or a family. And I don't know, the first 10 or 15 frames or first 10 or 15 minutes with your client, you know that you're probably not going to use any of them.
Right.
Because it takes a minute to get into the flow and get into the feel of this person's personality and how to capture them. And it takes a minute for that person to get comfortable with you as a personality and figure out how to interact with you. So you never tell them, of course. You never say, "These are, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, but these are looking awful." You just keep working them. Hey, this is looking good. Keep going. Blah, blah, blah. And then at some point you reach that point where you're like, oh, now we're in the flow and things are clicking and you're getting what you need. But it's kind of like writing too, you know. I'm sure they have to put words on the paper, but they know they're going to delete that whole paragraph later because they're not really feeling it. And the same thing happens in photography. Sometimes you just have to work through that stage until the feeling starts to show.
Yeah. I mean, it's just art. That's the language of art. It really is. It's doing the work so that the muse can arrive.
That's a good way to put it.
And that makes it sound all woo, but it's an easy way of saying, like, entering that flow state. It's not a switch. You a lot of time you got to work towards it, and then you build up to it and you get to it. All right, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna 360 back to the motorcycle gang.
Oh yeah.
All right, so just I just want to hear a little bit about this. So you guys decided to start this YouTube channel. Give us a little rundown on this.
Yeah. So during, when COVID hit, Steve Roos, who's a photographer in Florence or just outside of Florence, Hartsville, he runs a studio up there called Ashcraft Studio. Jason Bennett, who's just down the road here, really, we had lunch today, but he has a company called Docent Prodigy. He does corporate photography and video. And then, of course, myself. So anyway, it didn't really happen. Like, we didn't sit down and say, hey, you know what? We should start a YouTube channel. What actually happened was right before COVID hit, I had planned a motorcycle trip to Mexico. And Jason had heard about it. And he's like, hey, man, have you ever thought about, like, doing like a travel vlog of some sort? And I said, oh, I'd love to, but I'm terrible at editing video. He's like, well, I would love to go with you, but I can't physically go with you on this trip. So I would love to, if you record the video, let's partner up. I'll edit it.
Wow.
So that's how that started. Our connection between Jason and I really grew. We've been friends forever and, admire each other's work, but had never really collaborated like that before. And it just happened. And he had just bought a motorcycle himself after years of going without one. He grew up with a motorcycle as well, or had one at a younger age. So he had that passion, but just couldn't go on the Mexico trip with me.
Right.
So anyway, I did this solo trip riding through Mexico. And part of why I wanted to do that was I had so many of my family and friends and people locally that were like, you can't go to Mexico, man. You're going to get killed and slaughtered and murdered and shot. And I'm like, I grew up in Africa, man. People walking around with AK-47s in the middle of downtown. So I just wanted to prove to them, if you've never been outside of the United States, you don't know what you're talking about, first of all. You're being spoon-fed from the media, how awful the rest of the world is. And it's just not true. So I took this solo motorcycle trip down to arguably some of the, potentially worst sections that basically went down the eastern side of the Sierra Madre Mountains. And supposedly that's a chain for the transfer of drugs from southern and central Mexico up to the United States. But had no problem, nothing but kindness, people buying me lunch, people welcoming me to the country and inviting me to stay with them. I mean, I couch surfed with locals and had an amazing motorcycle trip. And so you can find that on my YouTube channel, on the YouTube channel, Moto Photo Mexico. It was that whole series. And it's Jason editing everything. Right. So whenever I would hit a hotel or somewhere with a decent Wi-Fi speed, I would upload the night's footage. Now, it became problematic because the cellular service and the Wi-Fi was kind of spotty. So there were times for sure where I couldn't get all of the day's footage transferred before the end of the night. It just physically wasn't going to happen because of the slow speeds. So anyway, long story short, we did that, but it didn't work out the way I thought it was, in that he would be editing the next day.
So you'd have a daily vlog, basically.
Yeah, I had a daily vlog, but sometimes it would come out a week late because of just how long it took to transfer footage. But anyway, so I got back from that trip, and that was awesome, and we had an amazing collaboration. And so I'm like, man, okay, so what do you want to? We got to do a trip. Well, in the meantime, Steve, my buddy from Hartsville, he had bought an adventure motorcycle. He was a Harley Davidson rider before that. And he's like, man, we got to do the Transamerica Trail. And the Transamerica Trail is an amazing trip from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast, transecting America, most of it dirt roads, rural roads, back country roads, all off, the beaten path. And it's an official route. You can go to just Google Transamerica Trail, and there's an official website where you can download the maps and do all that stuff. So we're like, yeah, let's do that. So the three of us paired up as COVID hit, and it was a pipe dream that we thought someday, like when we retire, we'll do it.
Yeah.
And when COVID hit, we suddenly had a lot less work.
It became someday.
And gas was cheap.
Yeah.
So we said, you know what? Let's at least do the first stage. So we set like a week or so aside, and we rode up to Morehead City, and we did the first stage together. And man, it was magic riding with these guys. You know how sometimes when you're on a road trip and personalities don't mesh?
Right.
This was totally opposite.
Wow.
I mean, we just clicked, and everybody knew their role and fit right into it. And it was just so much fun. I mean, riding solo was great into Mexico, but there were so many times where I was like, whoa, look at this amazing old ruins, or look at this incredible scenery. And I wished I had had somebody there to share it with. Well, on this trip, I had two of my best buds there that I could share it with, and it was just magical.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So we just had such a great time, and finished stage one, which we basically rode to Maggie Valley, North Carolina on our first stage. And then, like, I don't know, the next month, we're like, let's do stage two.
All right.
So we did stage two, which took us all the way to the Oklahoma border. And then, I don't know, a couple months later, we said, let's do stage three. So we've now made it all the way to Utah. And so we have stage 4 to go, the final stretch to the Pacific, which we will do as soon as the snow melts.
And it's snowing in that part of the country now.
Yeah.
So
in fact, when we ended the Utah, the third stage, a freak storm was coming in and temperatures were dropping. It was like, I don't know, 90 degrees one day and 30 the next. It was crazy.
Wow, that's so fun. And in this process, your YouTube channel has started to gain traction.
Yeah.
So
we have video.
Like I said, Midas touch.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to everything we've been talking about as creatives. You know, we started doing that just for the love of it, just for the fun of it. I mean, talking to Jason when he is in his groove editing one of these chapters, one of these episodes, he's just like a different person. You can talk to him and you just know he's just got stuff in his head, just visions going on. And it's so much fun to talk to him when he's working on one of those episodes. So he's definitely, getting his creative groove on. And of course, part of my creative groove was, we had to get all these little GoPro cameras and all these helmet cameras and figuring out how to shoot ourselves and how to get, good footage, drone shots of us while we're riding.
So cool.
A lot of very technical, but creative and free, thinking going on. And
the tools now are they're affordable. Like the 360 caamras.
Yeah.
You showed me some of the footage of you on your motorcycle with the 360 camera mounted on the back. And it's it's amazing. It's like, holy cow, look at these shots that you're able to get now.
Yeah.
Between all of these things, it's more than just a regular camera. It's all of these things put together, the action cameras, the drones.
Mm-hmm.
So cool.
Yeah.
And it really, he does an amazing job putting it together. It really does feel like you're watching something on the Discovery Channel.
Oh, that's
really does. Like when I watched it, I'm like, holy, this is like top notch. This is amazing. And it's no wonder it's taking off. It's no wonder sponsors are starting to come in. People are sending you stuff.
Sponsors. Yeah.
I love it, man.
In fact, I'm supposed to have something on my doorstep when I get home tonight. Now, I can't tell you what it is because we haven't announced them yet, but it should be kind of fun.
That's fantastic, man.
But yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to say about your journey and what makes you you? Because I think it's become obvious to me, the thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is the importance of following those things that you love, and just following them and seeing where they lead. Because life is short, and if you get the right people around you, like an editor, like your wife, those dreams can become a reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say that, when I teach workshops, one of the things I always like to point out is, if you are a photographer listening to this, know that you are totally unique. Every single person that picks up a camera, even though, as we talked about earlier, everybody's got a camera and everybody's a wannabe photographer because they have a phone. It doesn't really matter because each person has a completely unique vision, a unique past. I've told you about my past, but every single person on this planet has a very unique story. And that plays into how they see the world. And so I always encourage people to remember that your photos are going to be 100% unique, even if you're taking them from the same vantage point as 12 other photographers during a workshop. You're going to get totally different photos because you are a unique individual. And so that's one thing I think people should hold on to.
Oh, yeah. Portraits are a mirror. And it's true in fine art and in photography. You can judge the mood of the person
in the photo.
Well, of the person taking the photo by the person in the photo.
Yeah.
And same thing with the painting, same thing with just about any art form. It really is just a communication. It's a different way of communicating. And obviously a lot of people like you and your work.
Thanks.
And here's to your continued success. So ChrisandCamiPhotography.com.
Yep.
What social media?
Well, pretty much everything is at Chris and Cami. And then, so Instagram, Twitter, we don't do much on Twitter, but Instagram, Facebook. And then, of course, the YouTube is, it's youtube.com/Chris Smith Moto Photo Adventures. But the easiest thing is to just go to YouTube and do a search for Moto Photo Adventures.
And I'll link it all up in the show notes.
Awesome.
And we'll, thank you so much for coming in. I love that I've just got to know a lot more about you.
Oh, thanks.
My favorite part of doing this podcast so far is people that I know kind of on a casual basis, getting to know more about them and realizing just how amazing people are. And
that's cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, man. It's been awesome.
Before you get going, don't forget to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. And also, you can check out more at jwnpod.com or follow me on Instagram at Joe Laytons. That's at JOEL8X. Have a great day. Peace.